At my grandson's baby shower, my daughter-in-law lifted the blanket I had spent an entire winter making, pinched it between two fingers, and smiled toward the phone recording her. "We're keeping the nursery luxury only," she said. Then she dropped it into the trash. A few people laughed because they thought she expected them to. My son stared at the floor. I walked across the room, pulled the blanket from beneath torn wrapping paper, folded it against my chest, and left without raising my voice. That night, Daniel called me. He sounded as though someone had struck him. "Mom," he whispered, "what was sewn inside that blanket?" I was sitting at my kitchen table with the wool spread across my lap. Beneath the lining rested 30 years of my late husband's patience, and the final letter he had ever written. I ran my thumb over the small, stitched initials in one corner and asked very softly, "Why do you want to know?" "My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 67, and for nearly 4 decades I ran a dressmaking shop on Maple Street. I altered wedding gowns, repaired winter coats, and learned that price and value are distant relatives. My hands once moved faster than thought. Now arthritis locks my fingers on cold mornings, and I must warm them under water before I can hold a needle. I mention that because the blanket cost more than yarn. It cost 4 months of swollen joints, sleepless nights, and grief given a pattern. My husband, Walter, died 11 months before the shower after 42 years of marriage. I came home from the hospital to his boots by the door, his glasses on the chair, and a house still shaped around him. He drove the same pickup for 19 years, fixed neighbors' gates without announcing it, tipped too much, and saved money with the seriousness other men reserved for sport. He liked to say patience was the only investment ordinary people could afford without limit. Daniel was our only child. He married Vanessa at 34, and after 2 painful years, they finally conceived. Walter knew a grandchild was coming, but he died before an ultrasound became a face. A week before he died, he asked me to take down an old wooden cigar box from the top shelf of our bedroom closet. I had dusted around that box for decades. I assumed it held old receipts, foreign coins, perhaps letters from his brother. Instead, it was packed with savings bonds, stacked by year and tied with faded rubber bands. Some were so old the paper had softened at the folds. On top lay a cream envelope in Walter's blocky handwriting. For our first grandchild. I looked at him. "Walter, what is this?" He smiled with only one side of his mouth, because illness had taken most of his strength, but none of his mischief. "I started when Daniel turned 9, he said. $50 here, $100 there, every birthday, every overtime check, every year we had a little extra." I sat beside the bed with the cigar box open across my knees. "How much?" "Should be close to 50,000 now." I stared at him. We had never been rich. We had replaced appliances only when they made smoke. We had taken one proper holiday in 40 years. Yet there it was, a future built quietly in small denominations. Walter touched the top bond with one trembling finger. "Don't hand it over in a bank envelope," he said. "People spend envelopes. Put it somewhere they'll keep." "Where?" "In something you make." He looked toward my hands. "A blanket," he said. "Hide it inside, let them discover it. I want that baby to know someone was preparing for them before they existed." Then he asked me to take out a notebook. Over the next hour, pausing whenever breath became work, Walter dictated a letter to the grandchild he would never hold. He described the creek where he had taught Daniel to skip stones, the fishing pole he had planned to buy, the mistakes he hoped the child would be allowed to make, and the kind of person he hoped they would become. He made me read every sentence back. At the end, he said, "Seal it. Write open when you are 18. Let me stay a surprise." Those were among the last clear instructions he gave me. After the funeral, I began the blanket. I chose ivory merino wool, soft enough for a newborn and strong enough to survive childhood. Along the border, I knitted tiny green pine trees because Walter had loved camping, even though every trip ended with rain and one missing tent peg. In the lower corner, I stitched his initials, WH, so small that someone would need to look closely to find them. I worked slowly. Some evenings my fingers cramped until the needles slipped. Some nights I rested my forehead against the half-finished blanket and cried into the wool. Grief is strange labor. It leaves you exhausted even when you have done nothing visible. The blanket gave my sorrow rows, edges, and a pattern. It made missing him something I could hold. When I finished, I added a hidden pocket beneath the lining. I had sewn such pockets into traveling coats for years. This one was flat, nearly invisible, and secured with tiny stitches. Inside I placed the matured bonds and Walter's sealed letter. The total value, after I checked the numbers, was $48,600. Then I wrapped the blanket in plain white paper and tied it with a green ribbon. Vanessa's shower invitation arrived on thick, pearl-colored card and called the event a curated garden welcome for baby Noah. The registry contained a bottle warmer that cost more than my first sewing machine. Vanessa had been raised by Celeste, a woman who treated brands as moral qualifications and could mention a handbag's price while offering condolences. Vanessa inherited the fear of appearing ordinary and built her life around avoiding it. Their apartment was white, beige, and arranged like a catalog. During the pregnancy, even the baby became part of the display. Imported crib, neutral nursery, monogrammed baskets, designer outfits. Vanessa never openly insulted me before the shower. She simply regarded my shop, my clothes, and my reusable food containers as evidence that I belonged to an older, less impressive world. Daniel saw it. My son was kind, but kindness without courage can become surrender. He hated conflict and had learned to apologize, nod, and smooth every sharp edge before anyone asked what he believed. Walter's death broke him privately, yet in daylight he returned to Vanessa's carefully managed world and tried not to disturb anything. The morning of the shower, I placed the wrapped blanket on the passenger seat of my car. "Well," I said to Walter's empty place, "today we give it to him." I imagined Vanessa unfolding the blanket, me guiding her fingers to the hidden seam, Daniel recognizing his father's handwriting, and Walter entering the room again through the future he had prepared. Celeste's house looked like a wedding venue, with pale roses, a balloon arch, and Vanessa seated in a white chair while her friend Piper filmed. The guests wore expensive soft neutrals. I wore navy beneath a cream cardigan because at my age I no longer dressed to disappear politely. Walter's sister Ruth sat beside me and squeezed my wrist. She knew about the bonds. "Tell Vanessa before she opens it," she whispered. "She handles things like props." I smiled and said Walter wanted them to discover it. I wish I had listened. The gift opening became a product launch. Vanessa held up each item for Piper's phone and named the brand before thanking the giver. Celeste praised a French sleep sack, an Italian leather changing bag, and a stroller with a waiting list. Daniel stood by the wall with a glass he did not drink from. He caught my eye and offered a small, apologetic smile. An apology in advance for whatever he had already decided not to prevent. My package was opened last. Celeste lifted it from the table and read the tag. "From Grandma Eleanor," she announced. The room gave a warm little murmur. Vanessa pulled away the paper, loosened the ribbon, and unfolded the blanket. For 1 second, everything else disappeared. The ivory wool caught the afternoon light. The green pine trees circled the border. Walter's initials rested near her thumb. It looked exactly as I had hoped. Simple, warm, made to be used. Vanessa held it up and examined it. "You made this?" she asked. "I did," I said. "And there's something— oh, that's sweet." She interrupted me with the smile people use when they are already finished listening. Celeste tilted her head. "Very traditional," Piper kept filming. Vanessa rubbed the edge between her fingers, searching for a label that was not there. I watched the answer settle across her face. Handmade, homemade, not impressive, not useful to the performance. She laughed softly. "I love you, Eleanor," she said, looking toward the phone rather than me. "But the nursery is very specific." A few guests shifted. I leaned forward. "Vanessa, feel along the lower— "We're keeping the nursery luxury only." She said it brightly like a punchline. Beside the gift table stood a tall metal bin lined with a white bag for ribbons and torn paper. Vanessa rose, crossed 2 steps, and dropped the blanket inside. It landed on crumpled wrapping paper. People laughed. Not everyone, but enough. Celeste clapped once. Piper's phone remained raised. Daniel went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. That was the moment that hurt most. Not Vanessa's words, not the blanket in the bin. My son choosing silence while the last gift from his father lay in the trash. I could have shouted about the money, the letter, the hospital room, and the months of work. Instead, I noticed Piper's phone still recording and understood that Vanessa had preserved her own cruelty. The bonds were safe, the letter sealed, and the blanket undamaged. So I stood, lifted it from the bin, brushed away a strip of tissue paper, and folded it carefully. Vanessa's smile tightened. "Oh, you want it back?" "Yes," I said. "I think I do." She muttered that it simply did not match. I told her I understood. Calm left her nowhere to hide. Anger would have made me unreasonable. Tears would have made me fragile. I tucked the blanket into my bag, congratulated her, and looked once at Daniel. He could not meet my eyes. I cried in the car, holding the blanket against my chest. It smelled faintly of perfume, paper, and the lemon-scented bin liner. "I'm sorry," I whispered to Walter. Yet on the drive home, shame hardened into clarity. Walter had saved for Noah, not for Vanessa or Daniel. The baby would receive every dollar, but I would not place an inheritance into hands that confused contempt with humor and silence with peace. When I reached home, the telephone was ringing. It was Ruth. "Eleanor, I am so sorry," she said. "I should have stopped her." "You were not the one standing beside her." We both knew who I meant. Ruth said that after I left, anger had made her tell Daniel about the bonds and Walter's final letter. "He truly didn't know," she said. "He looked at the empty bin as if he had watched someone bury his father twice. Then he walked out." At my kitchen table, I opened the hidden pocket with a seam ripper. The bonds were flat and dry. Beneath them lay Walter's envelope. To Noah, "Open on your 18th birthday. Love, Grandpa Walter." I touched the handwriting and remembered him fighting for breath while dictating words meant for a young man he would never meet. Then my phone rang again. "Mom?" Daniel's voice cracked on the word. "Do you have the blanket?" "Yes." "Is it safe?" "It's on my table." He released a broken breath. "What was inside?" he asked. Though Ruth had already told him enough to be afraid, I did not soften the truth. "Your father's savings bonds. Every one he bought for his first grandchild since you were 9. They are worth $48,600. Daniel began to cry silently. "And his last letter," I continued. "The one he dictated in the hospital. He wrote it for Noah to open at 18. For several seconds, I heard only his breathing. "I stood there," he said. "I watched her do it. Yes. I told myself it was only a blanket. I know. I even laughed. A nervous laugh. That doesn't make it better." "No," I said. "It doesn't." He made the sound of a child trying not to sob. "I failed him." "You failed yourself first," I said gently. "Your father cannot be hurt by what happened today, but you can learn from it." "What do you want me to do?" It was the first time in years Daniel had asked that question without meaning, "Tell me how to make everyone comfortable again." "I want the family together," I said. "You, Vanessa, Celeste, Ruth. After the baby is born, I want to give Noah his grandfather's gift properly, with the truth in the room. I'll make it happen," Daniel told Vanessa that evening. He explained the bonds, the letter, the hidden pocket, and Walter's dying instruction. Her first response was not horror, but defense. "How was I supposed to know? Who hides nearly $50,000 in a blanket? Your mother should have warned me. Honestly, that feels like a setup." Daniel told me later that he had expected shame and found blame. Vanessa called the shower an unfortunate misunderstanding. She said the joke had been taken too seriously and no one understood the pressure of having every detail photographed. She did not call me or apologize. I confirmed the bond's value at the bank, then met a solicitor named Margaret Linwood. We created a protected education trust for Noah. The money could fund education, training, or a first home at the proper age, but neither parent could spend or borrow against it. Locking Daniel out hurt, yet Walter had saved for the child, and love is not proved by leaving doors unlocked after poor judgment. Noah arrived on a rainy Thursday morning, 7 pounds 2 ounces, furious with the world, and wearing Walter's exact frown. The first time Daniel placed him in my arms, I had to sit down. "There you are," I whispered. "Your grandfather has been waiting for you a long time." For a few weeks, the baby softened everyone. Vanessa was exhausted enough to forget performance and accepted soup in one of my old containers without complaint. Once I caught her watching the folded blanket with something close to regret. Then she posted Noah in a $400 outfit with every brand tagged, and I understood that sleeplessness had paused her habits, not changed them. I invited everyone to Sunday dinner. Ruth arrived early and helped place the blanket at the center of the table, hidden seam upward and Walter's initials visible near one corner. Daniel came carrying Noah. Vanessa followed in a cream dress, and Celeste entered last, looking ready to win an argument. We ate roast first. Hard truths should not be served to hungry people. After dessert, I cleared the plates and laid my palm on the blanket. "I would like to give Noah his grandfather's gift now," I said. The room became still. Vanessa looked at the wool, but not at me. "Walter asked me to hide the gift inside something handmade," I continued. "He wanted the family to discover it because he believed a thing found with care would be remembered." I picked up the seam ripper. Slowly, I opened the hidden pocket and removed the bonds. I placed the stack on the table. Walter began buying these when Daniel was 9 years old. $50 after a good week, $100 after overtime, a little on birthdays, a little at Christmas. He saved for nearly 30 years for a grandchild he had no guarantee of meeting. Celeste's eyes widened. The current value is $48,600. Vanessa went pale. Then I removed the sealed letter and set it beside the bonds. "This is Walter's final letter. He dictated it in the hospital for Noah to open when he turns 18. It contains the stories, advice, and love a grandfather would have given in person if he had lived." Daniel lowered his head. I looked at Vanessa. "This is what you held at the shower. This is what you called unsuitable. This is what you placed in a rubbish bin because it had no label and did not match your photographs." Vanessa's cheeks reddened. "You cannot blame me for not knowing," she said. "No reasonable person hides money in a blanket." "I am not blaming you for failing to detect money," I replied. "I am holding you responsible for discarding love because you believed it looked inexpensive. That is not fair." "What part?" "You let me embarrass myself." "No," I said. "You chose to embarrass me. The camera merely preserved the direction of the cruelty." Celeste shifted in her chair. "It was a joke," she said. Vanessa was entertaining her guests. I turned to her. "You taught your daughter that humiliation becomes harmless when fashionable people laugh. I would be careful defending that lesson in front of your grandson." Celeste closed her mouth. Vanessa looked toward Daniel, waiting for him to rescue her. For once, he did not. "Say you are sorry," he said. She stared at him. "Daniel, not for the money, for my mother. For throwing away 4 months of her work while her husband had been dead less than a year, for making a room laugh at her. Say you are sorry without explaining why it was partly her fault." His voice was quiet, but it did not bend. Vanessa looked at me. The first apology came automatically. "I'm sorry you were hurt." Daniel shook his head. "No, try again." She swallowed. Her eyes filled, whether from shame or anger I could not tell. "I'm sorry I threw away the blanket," she said. "I'm sorry I mocked something you made. I was cruel." The words sounded unfamiliar in her mouth. I believed she understood perhaps half of them. Sometimes half is where learning begins. "Thank you," I said. Then I explained the trust. Noah will receive every dollar Walter saved. The money has been placed in a protected education trust administered independently. It cannot be spent by his parents. It cannot be borrowed against. It belongs only to him. Daniel nodded. Vanessa looked shocked. You locked us out? Yes. But we are his parents, and therefore responsible for protecting what is his, not entitled to control it. She glanced at the bonds, then at the blanket. And the blanket? It remains with me for now. Her expression tightened. That seems vindictive. Daniel turned to her. Stop. One word. Firm, final, overdue. Vanessa fell silent. I then removed a smaller envelope from my cardigan. Walter had written a message for the day we opened the blanket. My hands shook as I read. If you are hearing this, the baby has arrived, and I am sorry I could not be there to make a nuisance of myself. I started saving because the greatest gift my grandfather gave me was proof that someone imagined my future before I could imagine it myself. Ruth began to cry. I continued. The money is not the important part. Every bond means I thought of you on a day you did not yet exist. Your grandmother knows how to put love into things that last. Learn from her the difference between what something costs and what it is worth. One can be printed on a tag, the other must be recognized. I loved you before I knew your name. Grandpa Walter. Noah slept in Daniel's arms while his father cried into the baby's hair. Vanessa stared at the blanket, reached toward the stitched initials, then stopped. I never saw those, she whispered. You were not looking, I said, and let the truth rest. I told her I was not trying to remove her from her child's story. I wanted Noah raised with more than one way of measuring the world. The trust was for his future, the letter for his heart, and the blanket for the nights when no photograph was being taken. Then I reminded Daniel that silence often protects the person causing harm and leaves the injured person carrying the cost. He promised to do better. Finally, I told them I was Noah's grandmother, not embarrassing labor in a cardigan, and I would be treated as family fully and respectfully. No one argued. Piper had posted the shower video before Daniel told Vanessa what the blanket contained. Vanessa deleted it, but relatives had already saved it. For months, she lived with being known as the woman who threw away her child's inheritance because it was handmade. I did not spread the video. Vanity had recorded its own testimony. Celeste stopped commenting on my clothes and containers. We never became close, but she learned that politeness costs less than conflict. Daniel changed most. A month after dinner, he sat at my kitchen table and said, "The blanket was not the first time I failed you. It was only the first time the result was visible." He and Vanessa began counseling. Daniel started speaking before resentment hardened into silence. Vanessa resisted, listened, and resisted again. Change did not arrive like lightning. It came like knitting, one imperfect row at a time. 3 months later, Vanessa called and asked me to teach her to knit. Every Wednesday, she came to my kitchen. Her first stitches were too tight, her second row curled, and she blamed the needles until I showed her how hard she was pulling. You cannot control wool by strangling it, I told her. She looked at me, then laughed once without cruelty. Together, we made Noah a crooked green hat, uneven and too large. It was the first thing Vanessa had created without a label to protect her from judgment. She photographed him wearing it and for once tagged no brand. The blanket stayed with me until Noah was 6 months old. By then, Daniel challenged cruelty, before apologizing for the discomfort, and Vanessa had learned to say she was wrong without always adding a defense. When I carried the blanket into their home, the designer throw was gone, and a photograph of Walter stood near the crib. I laid the pine trees over sleeping Noah. Vanessa touched the corner. "Well, I cannot believe I missed them." "You have to learn where to look," I said. The trust continues to grow. Walter's letter remains sealed for Noah's 18th birthday. Daniel plans to teach him to fish with Walter's old rod. My hands are worse, but on good days, I knit Noah a sweater with green trees around the cuffs, and Walter's initials hidden inside one sleeve. That is what people like me do. We place ourselves inside ordinary objects and trust love to outlast fashion. The day Vanessa threw the blanket away, she believed the room's most valuable gifts were the ones everyone recognized immediately. She was wrong. The money mattered, but the true worth was a grandfather preparing for a child he would never meet, a widow turning grief into something useful, a son learning that peace without courage is surrender, and a young mother choosing whether shame would harden into blame or open into change. Someday Noah will open Walter's letter and meet the man who loved him before his first breath. He may never understand how close that future came to lying beneath ribbons in a white rubbish bag, but he will know that love needs no logo, worth is not made visible by a camera, and handmade does not mean lesser. That was Walter's real inheritance, not only money but the ability to recognize what should never be thrown away.